With queer rights on the chopping block and the world seemingly becoming more and more polarized, it's comforting to know that there are people out there moving the bar forward. One of those people is here with us today. I'm Patrick Marano, and this is Queerly Us. Joining me today is Adam Awad. He's the new executive director for Max Ottawa, a health and wellness hub for queer and trans men, having just wrapped up his work as the manager of communications for the Gay Men's Sexual Health Alliance, where he was responsible for public-facing campaigns, media, and messaging. Equally comfortable at the boardroom table, at the barricades, or at the baths, Adam is my kind of guy. Adam, welcome to Queerly Us.
Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh. So we've been communicating a little bit back and forth, and you're just the loveliest guy, and I feel like we are like kindred spirits. I mean, just that line, from the boardroom to the baths, for example. Like, I feel like a lot of people that deal with sex or that are on the outside of this, who don't deal with sex on a daily basis and stuff, don't understand that people can be in those circles and other circles. We're multidimensional people, aren't we, Adam?
Absolutely. And I think it's such a funny transition that I had into working with sex more consistently that um, at first there's this hesitation around like, oh, well, like I need to be professional, like capital P professional. But then also, I have this whole sexual life that I experience that I'm connected to through community, especially as queer folks. There's so much tied to our sexual lives
Hmm.
that it really was a matter of, recognizing that actually I don't need to be uptight about it. I don't need to be upset about it.
Oh,
Uh, we all do it. We all think about it. And so why do we need to try to hide or like push away that particular side of our lives?
yeah. What a breath of fresh air, because I mean, my main YouTube channel is a lot about sex. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to say, hey, we have this aspect to us and we can talk about this openly. There's no need for us to, live in stigma or shame or anything like that, because we're all multifaceted people. And the person that cruises the park can also be a lawyer, for example, like Marcus
Often
McCann that
are.
I just had on my podcast.
Yeah, well,
Or
that's it.
somebody like you.
Yeah, and the funny thing is like if you hook up with somebody or you meet somebody while cruising or you meet somebody at the bathhouse or at a party somewhere or in a dark room, like we're all full people. We all have our daytime lives and we have our nighttime lives.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I've gotten from this work and that I think really I'm excited to chat with you about today is like when we are open about sex, it means that we can have conversations about sex that aren't necessarily titillating or erotic or taboo. It makes it a lot more accessible for people to go, oh, other people have awkward experiences. Other
Yeah.
people, can't perform all the time. Other people feel awkward about their bodies or uncomfortable at different times. Like other people are into the things that I'm into. And opening up that space to just like talk about it
Yeah.
without a lot of that baggage, I think makes for a lot of a healthier community.
Absolutely. Because I know me, I think I'm a little bit older than you, but growing up, a lot of my sexual education was porn.
Yeah.
And as much as I love porn, that's very one-sided,
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So,
and designed to be entertaining, to
yeah.
be titillating, and to make money, right?
Yeah.
Like porn is it's mostly created in an industry that's there to profit
Hmm.
and to keep your eyeballs, glued to the screen and watching more and subscribing and paying more money. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but it changes how we need to, especially like, younger guys becoming aware of sex, how we need to think about that and go, well, okay, yeah, it's a bit of a show. That isn't necessarily what day-to-day sex is like all the
For
time.
sure. For sure. Let's talk about then the Gay Men's Sexual Health Alliance. So maybe you can tell the audience a little bit about the organization, what they do.
Sure. The GMSH is dedicated to improving the quality of health and sexual health care that queer and trans men get across Ontario. So we work with service providers, community outreach workers, nurses, doctors, folks like that, to run training, to develop resources to help them do a better job in their work.
Mm,
And we work with guys in community directly to run public education campaigns to let people know what's what. Um, there's this question that comes up about how do I there's this question that comes up about how do I know um, about something that I hear about in the media around sexual health. Where do guys in community turn to for a reputable source of information? And that's the
mm,
GMSH. So
yeah.
we look for the receipts, we look at the research, we translate it into something that is accessible for the community. And the
Hmm.
most recent example of that was our work on the mpox or monkeypox outbreak last year,
Right.
that we pulled together the backbone of the community response across Ontario. And a lot of that came from, here's this report of a terrible disease that's moving through our communities. People need to know what's actually going on. And so we pulled together those resources and we made them accessible for people and said, this is what you need to know.
Yeah.
This is how it impacts your life. This is how it's going to change the kind of sex that you have.
And it's so accessible. Like I was on your I encourage everybody who's listening to go to the website. I'm going to put all the resources in the description and in the show notes. But I was on the website this morning, and it's super accessible and so easy to navigate. And all the information was there in a sort of easily digestible, form and fashion with like graphics. And so it appeals to me certainly, and it gets the information across.
Very, very happy to hear that.
Yeah. And well, so one of the main reasons I reached out to you in the first place to talk to you today was because I was scrolling on Instagram and I started to see some people that I recognize doing these sort of videos, these reels and stuff on Instagram. And I was like, what is this? And it was for the gay men's sexual health. And it was for the campaign Like Any Other Job. And I was like, "What is this?" And immediately I was like, "Oh my God!" So tell my audience, what this whole campaign was about, and the purpose of it.
Sure. So last year, we were looking at developing some social media content for International Sex Workers Day, which is June 2nd. And we decided to reach out to some guys in the community and pull together these short little interviews. And we thought, we'll put together like a short video, have a couple of perspectives on sex work among queer guys today, and post it for the second, and wrap it up, and it'll be good. And we ended up filming at Cock Bar in Toronto. They
That's right.
generously lent us their space, which was excellent. And we got 5 guys from the community. And in the end, we ended up capturing about 3.5 hours of raw footage that every minute of it was excellent. The
Yeah.
conversations that we had were so rich. The willingness of these guys to open up and talk about their experiences was really incredible. And we realized that we had so much more than a single post. And um, we work with a whole network of organizations across the province, including ACT in Toronto, Max Ottawa, and there's a program that's being run between 4 different agencies, and it's called TomQ. So it stands for Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, Quebec City, and it came
Mm,
around because there was an acknowledgement that there were no real tangible supports for guys doing sex work, and that
mm,
if you're engaged in like escorting or dancing, the likelihood that you're going to be moving around between the Quebec City, Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto corridor is really high. You might travel for particular clients. You might move because you're tired of one city, you're moving somewhere else, or maybe it's
mm-hmm.
more affordable somewhere. But there are all of these factors that go into it. So these agencies came together, created TomQ, and have started building up tangible resources. And one of those things that came out of it was a needs assessment that they did in 2019 and another one in 2020, 2021 during COVID, to look at what are the realities of guys doing sex work now, and what are their actual like material needs, challenges, supports. And we took those reports, the on the move they called it, report, and used that as the basis for our questions and our interviews.
Mm.
And the idea here is that anyone can create content, anyone can just sort of make a thing, but how rooted is it in people's experiences, in reality? How tied is it to the actual experiences that people have and the needs that people have? And can we, um, are we highlighting one story or are we highlighting many stories?
What I really appreciated about it was that and it wasn't glamorizing it in any way. It was very raw and real and just like warts and all, like this is what it's like, and it felt very authentic. The guys were very comfortable speaking about it. And again, it's just like this other, you see porn and that's how something is portrayed. And then, you see this campaign and you're like, oh, I love that it gives them a platform. Well, them. I am going to include myself in this. I have an OnlyFans page, so and I used to be a porn star in Los Angeles, so it gives people like me, I guess, a platform to show what it really is like, and that we're people, and it is a job, and so all of those things really resonated with me, and that's why really I reached out to you because I was like, oh my God, this is so great that it reminded me, I've done videos on my channel. I did one, about sex work specifically and everything. And I think when people think sex work, they might just think about, I'm going to get the word wrong because I don't know. Do we call prostitution? Is it called prostitution? Is that the correct term? But that might be the only form. When you think sex work, you might just, people think that, and then they just have all these negative connotations. So I love humanizing the sex worker like you have.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you. I appreciate that came through. And I think, when it's really important for me and for the folks at the GMSH and in our work to see everyone that we work with as an extension of ourselves, and
Hmm.
to not treat folks as if they're, other or different necessarily, um, and to create a space where people feel comfortable. So I'm very happy to hear that came through. Um, and on the work piece, that came up, in every single interview, that it is a job, right? It's a thing that people go to, that they set aside time to, that they're doing it to get paid, that they want to do it with dignity.
Yeah.
And when we talk about occupational hazards for any other industry, there's no baggage around, right? If you
Right.
talk about safety on a construction site,
Yeah.
people aren't like, well, if they didn't want to get hurt, they wouldn't be working in construction. It's like, well, no, we recognize that you need hard hats and work boots and safety precautions in those spaces.
Yeah.
If we take the like moralizing out of sex work and just acknowledge that people do it and they do it to make money and that people offer to pay them for those services,
Yeah.
and get rid of our hangups, that there are basic occupational health and safety needs for folks who are engaged in it in different ways. And it
For
doesn't
sure.
need to be that, dramatic.
Well, thank God you're around. It's funny because like even people, I mean, it's these sort of judgments that people have around sex work and stuff go so deep, I think, in our psyche, in our culture, and in everything, because it's not just, you might think, oh, these are uninformed or bad people that judge sex work and stuff, but I got friends that I know, I can tell by their expression or even the way they say something or the way they refer to, for example, my OnlyFans page. They kind of belittle it or they kind of, put it to the side. And they don't mean to, they're not trying to be mean. They're just, but it's so deep in our brains that this kind of work is not real work, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I
So,
think there's a lot of unlearning that we have to do. And I think for me, like I almost certainly had similar kinds of feelings, before I got into explicitly working in sex and around sexual health,
hmm.
that like I'm constantly having these realizations of like, whoa, apparently I think that. I need to like take a moment,
Whoop.
rethink that,
Yeah. Check myself.
check myself, and
Yeah.
that's totally fine. And I think we need more spaces where people can engage with um, sometimes difficult topics and
Hmm.
allow themselves to go, do I need to change how I think about this? And that there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And we need to be supportive of people going through that process and not um, not necessarily shaming someone for thinking something if they're willing to engage openly and honestly and maybe like lean into that discomfort around how they might think about something.
Hmm. Absolutely. And I mean, like I mentioned, these are people that know me. So it's not like, or they're my friends and like longtime friends, and there's still that little. So yeah, I think unlearning is a good way to say it.
Yeah.
But
I,
that's not the only. Oh yeah, go on.
well, I was going to say, I think too, it's so important to recognize the the difference between an individual needing to carry that conversation with their friends
Yeah.
versus an organization with resources being able to produce it. And I think that that's
Mm,
why I feel really strongly about the work at the GMSH and the work of this project is that it can't just be up to us as individuals to teach everybody in our lives
right.
to
Right.
like unlearn and carry someone through that. Like that's a lot of work to put
I'm
on.
trying, Adam. I try. I can only do so much.
Yeah, well, and
I need you
also,
guys.
yeah, it's like it's hard, it's tiring,
Yeah.
it's exhausting to have to go through that with your friends, right? Where you're like, well,
Mhm.
maybe I just want my friendship with you to be friendship, and I don't want to have to be a
Every,
teacher all the
yeah,
time.
every
And
time.
so, if an organization like the GMSH can take up that work and can facilitate those conversations and push people, well, you have multiple people behind an organization, right? You can
Yeah.
trade off and share that work and keep it going, even when one of you has to tap out. And we heard that from one of the guys that we interviewed around his HIV status.
Mm,
So he talked about, you know, needing to navigate disclosing to clients and having their lack of knowledge, insecurity, stigma show up, and him being in a position of having to teach them
yeah.
versus, say, the GMSH or other clinics or healthcare providers being the ones to constantly be telling people, hey, here's what's up with HIV. This
Hmm.
is what
Hmm.
undetectable means. This is how PrEP works. That when we collectively take on the education and engagement process, um, it relieves that work from individuals from having to do it. And I think that that makes our relationships better in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. But the that's not the only campaign you have. Another one that really stood out to me was, so I'm going to quote your website that
Sure.
said, the GMSH website that says, once a week or once a year, crystal meth, GHB, K, or poppers, solo or in a group. Each of us has our own reasons, experiences, and needs when we party. I mean, just that one little, phrase is like changes the whole thing. There's so much stigma and judgment around drugs in general. If you just think back to like the 80s and 90s, the main messaging, America's war on drugs, just say no. I mean, that was it. That's all they said. Just say no. There was no other options. There's no gray area. It was just either you were sober or you were like a crackhead and you were like evil and bad and all of those things. So I love that this messaging is very like, no, we all have our own experiences. Um, and of course, that's around party and playing, which I did for a long time as well. So I totally, yeah, I think it's so important. And then you have all the interviews on the website with the guys talking about their own experiences and around party and play. So maybe you can tell us, how did that come to be, and what's the main hope for having a campaign like that?
Sure. Yeah. So that campaign is really a labor of love
Yeah.
for everybody who has touched it, and other folks on the GMSH team have done a lot of heavy lifting to get it there, and so Dan Griffiths and Jordan Bongor really do need a shout out for their exceptional work on it. We see the need for campaigns like this where crystal meth, GHB, we're seeing increased use within the community,
Hmm.
and we're not seeing, or we haven't been seeing, an increase in the resources available for guys who run into trouble and want to make changes to their behavior. We're seeing a hardening of perspectives for a lot of people in the community around the use of particular drugs,
Hmm.
right? You'll hear people be like, oh, he's really methy, like he's a meth queen, whatever. I don't want to like talk to him.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, every half hour they're going to the bathroom and they're doing a bump of coke
Coke.
and
Yeah.
not like acknowledging that, actually in your brain, crystal meth and cocaine actually do very similar things in different ways, but you know, it they're not actually all that different.
Yeah.
And so the goal of the campaign is to open up a conversation, to bring some nuance into it, to acknowledge that there's a whole range of experiences. That there are some people who are able to party occasionally. They do it maybe once a year, twice a year. They don't buy it. It sort of happens as part of going out, but otherwise it doesn't impact their lives. You have some people who use it a bit more regularly and have no problems for a period, but then something traumatic happens in their life and they start to use drugs for a very different reason. We saw that with some of the guys that we interviewed. We have some people who knew right away that it was like, this is not a thing that I'm going to be able to handle. And then we had perspectives from folks who are concerned about what they're seeing in the community, where they're seeing the impact and they're feeling really helpless and powerless. And so the campaign is about opening up that conversation, acknowledging the nuance, to have a basis to then step forward and say, okay, now that we are here, how do we show up for everybody else in our community? As somebody who cares, as somebody who's partying, to acknowledge that there's this whole range of experiences and they're not all absolutely terrible and they're not all absolutely wonderful. They're as diverse as we are.
Yeah. Not everything has to be like good or bad. Maybe it just is, you know? And then some people, like you said, they do it and they need our compassion or they need our help sometimes, you know? And then so the judgment and the, putting them down for it or, it's just not. I myself, I know that and people do it for different, like to numb pain or to get over trauma also. I know for myself, I just was like a weekend warrior for a while, but then that snowballed and I became like a meth user, a daily meth user for a couple of years.
I think one of the other pieces that we're really hoping to do with the campaign is to equip guys with the scientific knowledge on what happens to your body, what happens to your brain when you are doing particular drugs. And that when you understand how it works, it makes it easier for you to navigate, right? If you want to understand the come down, you're like, I just had this amazing experience. I had a great weekend. I partied with people from Friday to Sunday, and I had the best sex that I've ever had in my life. And now I feel like garbage. The world feels flat. I like colors are dull. That when you understand that that's like a physiological response in your brain
Yeah.
to the impact of the drug, then it allows you to go, oh, okay, I'm just hungover. And I might be hungover for a week.
Yeah.
And that's part of this process. Whereas if you don't get that, then you're like, oh God, life not on drugs sucks now because that
I
was
better
so
do
good.
more. Yeah.
I just need to do more. And then you get into a cycle. It's very easy to get into a cycle then
True.
of going, in order for me to feel anything, I have to be high. Instead of saying, in order for me to feel anything, I need to let my brain recover for a period and deal with it and identify whether I'm comfortable. Like, is a week hungover or 2 weeks hungover for like full brain recovery worth
Yeah.
the party weekend? And if the answer is yes, have at her. Great, right?
Yeah.
Like, go have fun, do what you want to do. And that's true for crystal meth, it's true for GHB, it's true for alcohol. Like,
Yeah. Sure.
it's true for weed. Like, for me, if I smoke or do an edible, I know that for 2 days, my brain's going to be like slow and kind of terrible.
Yeah.
And so before I do it, I now go, okay, well, what am I doing tomorrow?
Well,
Do I need to be
that's an
functioning
adult.
goals?
Welcome to adulting. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and we should support each other to make those choices in
Yeah.
like with awareness, right? And where are you going to learn how those drugs impact you if every campaign is don't do them, don't do them, don't do them, and you're like, well, I'm going to do them.
Right.
So
Yeah, that's not helping. That's not the answer.
yeah,
Just say no. Oh, okay. Like it's so easy. Just say no. Oh.
well, and
Right.
what I think what that reflects is like a deeper moralizing around sex, around drugs, around queerness, that
Right.
all of that just say no says, well, if you say yes, it means that you're bad. It means that you're a lost cause. It means that you're
Yeah. Yeah.
worthless. It means that there's no help for you
Yeah.
if you decide that you want to do anything about it.
Yeah.
And I think that that's way more dangerous.
Yeah. No, for sure. It's the whole black and white. Like you're a sinner.
Yeah.
then you've just done something bad, period.
Yeah.
Right?
And
Regardless.
by extension, deserve all of the bad things that might happen to you as a result.
Right. Including the judgment from others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say two other really good resources that I'm really proud of working on and having the team work on are our first season of a YouTube series called HIV Plotlines,
Okay.
where we talk to Jade Electra, who is a pause drag queen and an activist, and JP LaRock, who is a queer non-binary film and TV writer. And they dissect popular film and TV plot lines that have to deal with HIV
Oh,
from the
wow.
1980s until now,
Okay.
saying like, okay, this is when it was released. Here's how it was portrayed. Is that accurate? Is it
Right.
complete? Did it stand the test of time? There are some where it's like, oh yeah, actually this was really good from the 80s and it still holds up today. Like it was dealt with sensitivity and integrity. And then other stuff that's new where you're like, oh, you were grasping. You don't know anything about HIV. You totally misrepresented it. And the idea is to push back a little bit on, if you see this in the media, but you don't necessarily understand the realities of HIV today,
Right.
that you might have the wrong impression. So, one show that had a very notable HIV plot in it near the end, they effectively used it as a tool to kill off a character, but he like got his diagnosis and then within like days was dead.
Oh,
And it's just not,
right.
not how it works
That's not how it
at
works.
all.
Yeah.
Uh, and so I'm really proud of that work, and I think folks should check it out. There's a plan to do a season 2 of it, and then the other one is Audio Sex Party. So that's a podcast that was produced in 2019 and brought together real guys to have a lot of these same conversations with nuance, with sensitivity, to talk about their lives and the way that they have sex. And that's available wherever you listen to your podcasts. So those are my other campaign plugs.
So let's move over to Max now. So now you are the executive director for Max Ottawa.
Brand spanking new.
Well, so then let's talk about Max.
So Max is a queer health hub, provides a variety of services, relatively young, and it came out of the Ottawa Gay Men's Wellness Initiative. And the idea was that um, we needed better coordination, better linkage to care, better access to resources for queer folks living in the region. And so that gave birth to Max, and the programming has expanded. So we now offer access to harm reduction materials. So if you're engaged in P&P, for example, you can pick up a safer party kit. That's going to reduce, on a like tangible level, reduce the incidence of like, bacteria and virus transmission. It's going to reduce harm. It's going to make it easier for people to link up to care, right? If you're coming into a service to pick up your kits, at some point you might say, I think I actually need to talk to somebody about something. And you have a
Mm,
supportive staff person right there who can be like, oh, yeah, we've got this mental health coordination piece. You want to have access to a therapist or a counselor. Let me bring in this other staff person, and they're going to help get you connected to somebody who can help. So the
mm,
idea is that it's a soft entry point to helping people figure out an otherwise like pretty disjointed healthcare system here. So it's easy to get lost in the cracks, and Max is there to help fill those cracks and make sure that people get the care that they need. There's a lot of resources here. There's a lot of energy here. I think sometimes folks get stuck on some of the headlines about the city and don't necessarily look deeper at
mm.
the lives of folks who are living here. And there's a lot going on, and I think that is really inspiring. It's really encouraging, and I'm so excited to have an opportunity to tap into that and to help coordinate it, to help make it more accessible for people. Like if you move to Ottawa, I feel like Max should be your first stop to figuring out what's happening with queer life here.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited to bring that to the table and help get folks connected.
Adam, you are like a sexual health superhero, right? Coming to the rescue.
We're in a particular moment in society right now where there's this real pushback against queerness and against transness and anybody who dares to be a little bit different. And I think it's important for us to keep the bigger picture in mind, to recognize that I think we're going to win by shining brighter. Um, I think that we're going to win by being open to folks in our lives who are maybe at the edges of some of these spaces, to make sure that they can feel um, included in it without necessarily feeling alienated. To recognize that, like, ultimately gender doesn't really matter and shouldn't really matter, right? We all deserve dignity, we all deserve respect, we all deserve safety.
Mm-hmm.
uh, and that's the world that we can and should be building. So I think we're going to do it, but I think we also need to make sure that we're working together, that we're supporting each other, that we're showing up for each other, whether that's, at a school, like happened just recently here in Ottawa,
Mm-hmm.
or whether that's at clinics, or whether that's anywhere else where folks might be turning queerness and transness into a battle, um, that we need to make sure that we're showing up.
And we are going to win. We're going to win because we have people like you leading the charge, right? And providing the services and leading organizations that you do to help support the people most in need. So thank you so much, Adam, for everything that you do. Honestly, thank you so much for being on my podcast today. I really appreciate you giving your time to me today. And for the rest of you, I will see you in the next episode of Queerly Us.